Good morning, good afternoon, everyone. Thanks for joining us for the Shure Wireless Workbench Deep Dive. Today's workflow series, we're going to explore Workbench and all that comes along with it. We're super psyched. We have some special guests for you and some hands-on approach. A little housekeeping, if you're interested and you want to play along at home, you may want to download the latest version of Workbench. We've had some recent updates, and even if you don't have equipment connected, you can still play along and see what we're doing here and kind of emulate the same things at home. In addition, we have a couple updates, just a quick little bit of housekeeping. Our new schedule for September with the workflow webinars is that we're moving to the second and fourth Fridays starting September 1st. So the same time, 12 p.m. Central, and you can check out past webinars as well as future ones at shure.com/webinars. So check that out, see a bunch of content that we've already done and more to come. So we're excited about that. Additionally, the tech talk that we do every other Tuesday is still the same. So same time, same channel, first and third Tuesdays starting September 1st. So 12 p.m. Central for that, Shure Tech Talk. I am Ben. I'm joined here with Jen Liang Shabu. We have our entire market development team and sales team in the background helping answer your questions. So we're very excited about this. If you'd like, please put any questions about Workbench or Shure stuff in general in the chat, and we'll try to get to those as they pop up. It's always better to have an interactive approach. We have some questions coming in rather than just, letting the fire hose rip. So without further ado, I'd like to introduce our two guests here, Loreen Bohannon and Corey Peoples. And really, when it comes to Workbench, I'm very psyched to have both of them here with us. Loreen has done a lot of things, including audio engineering for Lizzo, tons of RF coordination, live sound touring, festivals, consulting, support planning, real world experience. None higher here than Loreen. So we're going to dive deep into that. And then we have the venerable Corey Peoples, software product manager for Shure, which is a huge thing, as you can imagine. We got like a lot of high profile software that we keep up to date, and we have education like this to get you more familiar with it. Some of the things that Corey is working on currently: Wireless Workbench, the Shure Update Utility app, and then the ShurePlus Channels iOS app. Again, if you're not familiar with that and you have an iOS device, go online to the App Store, download it. And it's really cool. It's kind of like a light version of Workbench. It gives you a lot of functionality and so forth with that. So without further ado, we're going to dive into some of the cool stuff about Workbench. And we were talking a little bit earlier with Loreen and Corey. And Corey's got a few things to kind of show us with Workbench about some of the newer features that you may not be familiar with that we've added pretty recently. So without further ado, I think I'm going to turn the screen share over to Corey, and he can kind of walk us through some of the stuff there.
So some of the latest things that we've done in Wireless Workbench include some updates to the plot view here in the frequency coordination tab. So I'm just going to get a scan started because that's how we're going to end up looking at a lot of this information.
What are you scanning on?
This I'm using a wideband analog scanner, the AXT600. It's the spectrum manager.
Copy that.
Cool. You can see all the 8 radios in there drawn out simultaneously. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So this does wideband 470 to 952, omitting a section here in the upper 800s and lower 900s. But it's great because it gives me a nice wideband scan, gets it pretty quickly. Right now, I've set this to scan just with a single sweep as opposed to continuously. But that's an option that I have. So even when you take a scan in this coordination workspace, what you're really doing is trying to come up with what is the data against which we're going to compare exclusions. So I've got this scanning just a single sweep, but if I were to do continuously, like say you wanted to run worst case scenario during your setup, then you could just set this on continuous, and then when you're done, press stop, and it's just going to collapse that into a peak hold of all of those sweeps so that you have something to compare against as like your worst case scenario when you came in. I'm going to change a couple colors here just because I want it to look a little brighter. It's a little dark on my monitor here, so change the overlay for my exclusions generated by the scan, and I'll change what the plot color is too. So one of the biggest updates that we made here was how to take a scan and how to configure it. So we collapsed everything down into this nice convenient list that you can do from the main window here. It used to be hidden behind a dialog, which we still have, but this is typically used for configuring your scan. So if I were to see my AXT600 wideband scanner here. I left it at its default configuration, so I can scan from 470 to 952, or I can double click and change that range if I wanted to focus on a very specific area. Likewise, for this device, I could change the resolution bandwidth and make this a little bit tighter or a little bit wider, and the step size itself can also be changed for this device too. But what you'll notice as well is that for some of the devices, if we were to add, let's just take everything from my inventory for an example, just so I can populate some information here. I'll bring in my devices, and another thing that we showed here is the band overlay for the devices that are currently in your coordination workspace list. So we wanted to do this just so you have a quick reference, a visual reference for what it is you're coordinating against. And this is great to show sort of like as an inclusion map of where any of your frequencies would ultimately end up. So I'm going to hide some of these frequency markers here just so I can clean that up and you can see it a little bit better. But let's say that I do have my frequencies currently brought in. Another visualization that we give you is intermods as well. So I can turn on intermods based on their level, whether that's 2 transmitter third order, 2 transmitter fifth order, so on, all the way up to 3 transmitter third order. And we present those in the plot just to give you a better understanding of how these frequencies, denoted by the markers, interact with one another. And so if I were to move this around, you'll notice that when I stop dragging it, some of those intermod markers also update. And that's to indicate that this is a change that is actually material to your calculation. If you want to see that in real time, on Mac, you can hold the command button, and you'll see how moving any given frequency will also affect where those intermods fall. Can you hear the sirens going by?
I heard a little fire truck going by there.
We might get that a few times. It's been a little while up here lately.
Good reminder to stay off the public safety bands down low there. If you're
Indeed. Indeed, yeah. So staying out of TV 14 and 15.
They're going to win anyway.
That's true.
Every time.
Yep. Every
time. So yeah, it's mostly for your safety, just to make sure that you're staying out of their way and that your performance is not impacted. It's actually a good segue there. So down here in the lower right sidebar, if you want to avoid some of those frequencies that are popping up from ambulances or police cars and so on, you can choose the Spectrum tab and then the gear icon here for TV channels. And right now I have no TV channels being avoided, and I can just look up my postal code and find out what TV channels, public safety channels or otherwise, are potentially going to affect my spectrum. So I'm in 60618, lovely Irving Park neighborhood of Chicago. And I can find here that when I search, since I'm connected to the internet, I get this online frequency finder database. We've also got a link to that on Shure.com. You can use this at any point on the website just to find out what bands are probably best for your area. Now, it won't give you necessarily every TV channel or the whole frequency coordination, but it does give you a good indication of what bands for a given product would be most available for you. So here I've got a list of TV channels that I now need to stay away from in my area. And if I just save that, what you'll see is that these overlays, which I currently have colored in pink here, will start to plot all over the spectrum here. And that lets me know that when I go to calculate new frequencies, the calculation engine of the application is going to stay away from those areas, just so that you don't fall into a trap of potentially being affected by a TV transmitter or public safety. So I kind of jumping around here, but I want to show you some of the other things that we added. So quite similarly for the frequency plot, which is a very similar tool to the coordination plot, we did also add the band overlays here, so you can turn those on and off. You can also bring in a scan. So if I wanted to, for example, I could save this scan data here. Sorry, I'm using 2 monitors, so you might not see some of the things that pop up. And we'll just say this is a test from August 28th. So So I can bring this in. And now I'll get basically the same plot, same data brought in over on this plot here. This one is a little bit more purpose-built, and it's designed for you to run over a period of time, because we give you a time slider here. So in fact, if I want to take that same scanner, my AXT 600, select this, and I can choose to scan continuously. So I'll just leave that running in the background. That's basically all it's going to do. It's just going to keep plotting until I tell it to stop. And right now I've got it configured to show me not only the scan data of the active scan, but its peak hold. So I'll use a different scanner to show you a little bit more about how you can scan through time. So I can take a ULXD, and I'm going to reconfigure this, and I'm going to scan a very, very narrow area from 470 to 476. Okay, and now I'm going to tell that one to scan continuously. So if we look down here and we remove some of this noise, and remove the old plot, my TV channels, and heck, I'll even remove my frequency markers and my intermods. So this is just going to scan continuously in that narrow area that I defined. I want to scan TV channel 14. And as I mentioned, in this plot, this is just going to stack and constantly bring back my peak hold, as opposed to having multiple sweeps to look through in this plot. And so those were the major updates that we made for the coordination workspace and for the frequency plot areas, adding this information, making it a little bit more easy to use and to navigate your area, to sort of clean up the plot, because we knew that it was kind of getting messy with all the information that we're providing.
That's great, Corey. I have a couple questions that popped up here. One directly related to this frequency sweep and scanning. Of course, you can right-click and save your scan data and share it or email it, etc., archive it. I'm curious about are these scan files saved with a show file, and what that relationship is? When do you have to save? If I save a show file, does that save all my scanning that I've done? Maybe you can touch on that a little bit.
Yeah, absolutely. And it's a great question. So when you take a scan with a Shure device through Wireless Workbench, a sort of temporary file gets saved into the show file. So if I were to take this currently unsaved show and save it, the scans that I've taken so far will be saved as part of that file. However, if you import a scan, whether that's from a Shure device or from a third-party device, that does not get saved. And it's typically because it comes in some other format that we end up translating into something that Wireless Workbench understands, which typically ends up being a CSV style format, where one column is going to be your frequency and one column is going to be your RSSI, or your dBm value.
Perfect. That's really helpful. In addition, we had another question pop up from Kenneth. Thanks for the question, Ken. How often is the TV database updated? Since you discussed the changes that if you're online, you can now get the Shure Frequency Finder database into Workbench. What's the update cycle on that?
Yeah, it's a great question. So since we moved to using our own version of the scan database, previously we were working with a third party, and we weren't always in sync, and we typically needed to make an update, not only in the application, but they needed to make an update to the API. And so that had the effect of kind of slowing some things down and having to wait for a new build cycle. Now that we're connected to this, and certainly since you'll be online using most of it, as long as you're connected to the internet, this is going to be updated anytime the FCC makes a change. It typically takes us about 48 to 72 hours to make our change internally to have that be reflected. Sometimes it's the same day. It really depends on how confident we are in the changes that they've made, because even the FCC, they've got multiple people making updates to their data. I just imagine that whatever changes they're making, sometimes wires get crossed. But we've seen really good results within 72 hours of having this data updated anytime there's a change made to the FCC database. Now, if you're offline, so say I were to disconnect my internet, which I won't do because then I will drop from this call. If you're offline, we do have an offline database that is current as of the release. So we always make sure to update our offline database based on the online info that we get for every build of Wireless Workbench that goes out.
So just a related, that's great. A related question is that if, say you have Workbench, you installed it, you went online and updated it, but then you're offline, does it take the offline as the Workbench was compiled, or was it updated as the last time you connected to the internet?
So as of now, it is updated as of last time Workbench was compiled and built out, not an update immediately. Though that is a change that we've heard that people would like, is to just pull that down, and I think that's something that we're capable of doing.
Awesome. A related question, I'm not sure if we can answer this one, but John was asking if there's any plans to have a community database or crowdsource scan database for Workbench users where we could perhaps share scan data and that sort of thing.
No plans just yet, but I mean, that immediately brings to mind a dozen questions that I have for you guys and for our users, is how you would like to see that manifested. Where would you like to see it? Would you be willing to sign into a profile to do it? One of the first things that comes to mind for me is just like spamming or bad data and that sort of thing. So in order to put some security around it, a little bit of protection from bad data, I imagine we'd want to have a sign-in or a forum where that stuff could be kept.
Absolutely, yeah. Maybe like a reputation rating or maybe stars or something like that for
something like that. Yeah.
How much this contributor is trusted, right? That's perfect.
Or you can credential yourself with your tour, the artist that you're working with while using the frequencies. Like we talked about it when we did the thing. I had a lot of trouble in Germany where I had to get printouts from the local cities and the local government to just coordinate the TV channels because they didn't match up with what is in the database. And like you said, it's difficult to get the information from them. So it'd be nice to have like users be able to I had all the frequencies and all the TV stations listed on documents. I could have uploaded them to that user site for other people to use.
Yeah, that's a great use case. You're struggling to find what the spectrum actually looks like in a place that you're going to go. So you could have in advance sort of looked around on a Google Map style thing and found where you're going to be in Germany and then pulled down a couple scans that might look representative of where you might have been.
And might have exclusionary like frequencies, that weren't like, I had a list of all the TV channels in Germany, and they would tell me in what cities which TV channels would be active. And I'd have to go through and like almost like a chart, figure out which ones were in the city and then put them in the exclusions.
Yeah, so it becomes a very manual process. Yeah, I could definitely see how having a scan database would make that much, much simpler. Yeah, as always, we tend to prioritize based on what our customers want. So, some people know how to contact me, other people know how to contact system support or you, Ben, or anybody in the market development area. But, I'd be curious how many people on this webinar are interested in such a thing. And if you are, drop a little note saying, I want this scan database. And, that helps us prioritize what we're working on.
I don't know if you can see, Corey, but the Q&A is blowing up with people saying, yes, please. It's awesome. We love it. I want the scan database. It's going off right now. So thanks for the input. Keep it coming.
Yeah, absolutely.
I have tons of scans that I can give to everybody from all over the world too. So
yeah, that'd be great.
Nice.
Just to kind of touch base real quick, a kind of an unknown thing when Loreen brought it up is sometimes the scan data isn't exactly accurate with where you're at, depending Germany or US or whatnot. I think maybe Corey might be able to show a real quick way of excluding or including a TV channel, which you might not know about. Is just a right click on that TV channel number in the bottom, and then you can toggle it on or off, which is extremely helpful.
Yeah, so let's say that I found something in my spectrum data. So I'll stop this scan here. That's just going to flatten down into the peak hold of all of that. But let's say, yeah, this is a perfect example. It looks like a TV channel because I can tell this leading edge here. That's the signal carrier and the rest of the signal there. And it's falling right over TV channel 18, even though it's not reaching up here to what I consider my default exclusion threshold, this negative 85 dBm, it's still something that I don't necessarily want to risk. So I can just hover over this little TV channel 18, and you can see that overlay pops up to highlight it, and I can just right click and exclude it, and now it becomes part of the exclusion list.
That's awesome. Thanks for showing that. It's super easy to turn it on or off depending on what you visually see on the scan data, which is awesome.
Yeah, any other questions about this plot area here, or something else that popped up?
You could also, can't you also manually exclude it on the TV channels list by checking it?
Yeah, you certainly can. So in that dialog where I was just at, same effect here as I can right click, or I can just click on the checkbox. And let me expose this a little bit here. So this will tell you where that exclusion comes from as well. So this is all the Shure wireless frequency finder, but this one here on TV channel 28 that I excluded was a manual user exclusion. Same thing here with that TV channel 18 that I was just playing with. Oh, I guess that one didn't exclude it, so it took it from me. But yeah, this will denote what's a wireless frequency finder exclusion versus a user exclusion, for example.
That's how I would do my exclusions. I just liked visually seeing it on there more than on this side.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's definitely helpful to see it in this tabular format too, because you're also getting the frequency ranges there. You're getting the TV channel. It's a lot of rich information in this view.
Also, when you're coordinating in a tight coordination, if you look at it, if you look at his tab screen right now, there's a digital station that's 44 miles away. If I was really, really tight on frequencies, I would consider removing that manually and coordinating within that zone.
Yeah, it's pretty close to that 50-mile threshold there.
50 miles is like where I like to be, outdoors 60, but if you're real tight, sometimes you can take something that's like 43 to 40, 50 miles is kind of like usually okay.
Yeah.
Like New York City and California, for example. If you can swing it and open something up and try to get something in there, do it.
You're most likely going to need it there too.
Yeah.
That's right. Yeah. So as we're talking here, the chat's blowing up with questions and suggestions about third-party frequency and other databases. Some that come to mind are the Best Audio website, and Gotham Sound has Gotham Scans, and others too, even from SBE coordinators and so forth. So I think the topic comes up, which we've talked about previously, about importing other types of scan data into Workbench and that typical workflow. So maybe Corey can kind of go through some of the particulars of how that's done and how you would accomplish that.
Yeah, Loreen?
I do all my scans outside of Workbench. Like I have not carried an ADX600 at all for my year, even though I requested it. So I actually emailed ahead some CSV files. I don't know if you guys got them, but I did email ahead some scans that I did in Los Angeles without taking out the information. So these are actually LA scans. I'm pretty close to the forum where I'm at. So they're pretty active. But when you are putting a scan from an outside scanner into Workbench, right now, as it stands during this current version, you have to still remove information from the beginning of a scan so that wireless Workbench can read the file properly. So for example, I use a TTI to do all of my coordinations. This is my favorite little scanner. It's a little complicated to use, but it's very high quality scan data. And so do we have those scans in there? Did the people at home get them if they want to use them? Cool. Yeah. So you can open it up. Thank you, Corey.
Of course.
I usually open it up and text edit because Excel is a pain in the butt. So I prefer like a Word editor versus Excel for removing information.
Yeah, why don't we open up one in each?
Nice.
See if I can text edit here.
This is, yeah, I normally do it in there. So for the TTI files, you have to remove all of the information to the gradical shift at 0, 0. And then you start at the numbers, and all wireless Workbench wants is the numbers. It doesn't want any of that beginning information.
That's exactly right.
Corey did inform me that he is working on a way that we will not have to do that in the future. But as it stands right now, this is how we do have to do it.
That is correct. So right now, all you got to do, as Loreen said, is go down to the first row where you're going to see your first frequency and its first amplitude value. And then everything above that, just simply delete. So delete that and we can save this. I'm actually going to save as. So I'll duplicate this and then we'll call this LA3 stripped. Cool. And so simple as that from a TTI. Now we've got this new file that we can import. Same thing if you decide to do it in Excel. It's just a comma separated value file and it presents it in 2 columns here. All we got to do is take these top 14 rows, in this case, might change depending on how you output it and what information comes along with it. But if I just delete that, I end up getting the same information. So this one is LA2. I'm going to save this as.
And I will say I do all my scans in 3 parts usually because I like to have higher quality information and less time running. So my scans are usually split into 3 frequency bands. So right now he's in the 550 to 650 range. So you can actually see it displayed in the file. It starts at 550 and then it will go and end at 650. And so if you're ever confused looking at your scan files, it's really easy to see where you're at. Frequency wise, if you're like a little confused on which ones you've pulled in. But labeling is very important.
Super important.
Nice.
So I think I left that one here. Desktop scan file. So I'll bring in both of them. We stripped the LA2 in Excel. We stripped the LA3 in TextEdit. So I'll take my LA2. And there you go. There's your scan that comes on in.
Looks good.
We could take LA3 and do the same thing, and those are just going to butt up right next to each other.
Los Angeles is asininely quiet right now. I was like, what is this when I was doing these scans? I was like, can we do some shows, please?
Oh my goodness, this would be the perfect time.
Look at this. Look how beautiful it is. When you drop in the third one from 650 to 750, you're like, what? Yeah. Oh, no, actually, you didn't do 1. So it's the 450 to 550. That's the busier range. But I was like, this is nuts.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, there it goes.
Yeah.
So we could do the same thing.
Also, shout out to 8th Day Sound and Megan Holmes for giving me a TTI to play with and get some scans in Los Angeles. I really appreciate it.
Nice.
Because I was going to buy one, but then coronavirus.
We had a bunch of comments come in and related. One from Dan says that the older version of the TTI, the 2701 model, doesn't require any data to be removed from the scan. It'll load straight in. So apparently it doesn't put all that header information.
But I thought the older version of the TTI doesn't have the frequency bands that we usually use. Like this is the TTI 1302, the AIM TTI. It's 1.3 gigahertz. So this one I think does 450 to 1.3 is its range. So there's different frequency ranges on each of the TTIs. So you just have to be aware of what you're dealing with. And the older versions deal with ranges that we don't usually use much anymore. If they're not on the TTI website, then they're probably out of date in the frequency range.
I remember the first one I had 10 or 15 years ago. It took like a Palm Pilot that slid in the back of it, and it was
this thing is pretty cool. It's still kind of like a Palm Pilot. Has a thing, touch screen. They gave me a real crazy antenna. It doesn't normally have this antenna, but hey.
Another comment came in from John. Thanks, John. There was a macro at Best Audio that deletes the TTI header info. So if you want to check out Best Audio website,
nice.
Peter Erskine, that's pretty cool.
There's a little Python thing that does that too, he said.
Yeah. So if anyone's interested and you fancy yourself handy with command line or a terminal on Mac, I wrote a little Python script that will do the exact same thing.
It's awesome.
Automated.
Super handy if you've got a folder full of scan files and they're all the same format. You can just plug in the directory line and it'll just strip all of them.
Are there any pros and cons of using like besides the connectivity, using like a Shure receiver or a Spectrum Manager versus an external, Corey or Loreen? I'm sorry, Loreen. Yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, go for it.
Real world experience. There's
Real
a huge
world.
difference.
How do you feel about this?
I would love to. The funny thing is I had the Shure scanners on my gear list, but it was really hard to get them out this year. Everybody had them, and the companies that had them in, they're all out with the big axe. So it was hard to get them, which is why I ended up with a TTI. But when I got to use the AXT600, it was so much smoother and simpler to coordinate all of I use Shure in-ears mostly. I was using Sennheiser wireless for my tour, but it was so much easier. And the other thing that I appreciate is the seamless frequency swapping. Like if you have that unit where you can change the frequencies without a drop in audio, that is incredibly useful, and you can really only do that when you have a whole connectivity like the AXT600 and all the units within it. And it's just so much more efficient and useful as a monitor engineer than having to do this and then having to have a whole separate mix for my artist, which I'm going to do anyway on a different frequency, but then having to run out. And like with Lizzo, she doesn't leave the stage, and her pack is like in her. So like changing out a pack is difficult. So like having something like that where I could swap the frequency without a drop in audio was incredibly useful when I can have it. And the scans were so much more seamless and quick to do with an AXT600 versus like, my TTI. Same quality of scan, I believe. Like I truly believe they're the same quality of frequency scan, same information and things like that, but definitely a much easier and seamless scan and coordination using the Shure gear.
That's great. Joe commented that he says that the noise floor of the TTI looks much greater than the AXT600, and he's curious if that has to do with the environment or just it's different equipment. Maybe why that is.
Well, he's in Chicago and I'm in Los Angeles. I had it. I mean, that's normally the noise floor. Actually, that is a big difference. But I'm in Los Angeles. I had it on -20 on the TTI, which is the lowest the noise floor can be. So. Mine on the TTI does usually come in on the low 99s, but I'm assuming it's just because I'm in Los Angeles and the noise floor is a little bit higher, but I could be wrong. I don't necessarily know. I've not necessarily ever compared an AXT 600 at scan and a TTI scan on the same graph, so I've never really noticed really a difference, although it's kind of scary a little bit. But that's Chicago versus Los Angeles. So I'd be interested to see what the scan looked like in Los Angeles versus Chicago, because I have a much easier time coordinating in Chicago than I do LA.
Yeah, I think some of it has to do with definitely the location, but I think it's also the components too. So the AXT600 is extremely sensitive. I wish I had more familiarity with the TTI to speak on that intelligently, but yeah, my assumption is that it's different sensitivity of components, and I could you remind me what the bandwidth is on that TTI? Because I'm assuming that if it's like super wide band, then some of the sensitivity ends up being lost and now raises some of that noise floor. Just an assumption.
Let me check it out specifically. I'm gonna look it up real quick. I'd be interested if I took like a bunch of my scans from across the US and we compared them in Workbench, like I know you guys have scans from across the US from the AXT, so I'd be interested to compare them and see if it's a consistent noise floor issue and see what the comparison is, and if we can't figure out why. That'd be
Agreed.
Cool.
The comment came in, actually Jen brought this up from the RBW setting, the resolution bandwidth of a scanner. And Loreen, you talked a little bit about how you take chunks like in 100 megahertz or so when you're doing scans. So I think there's a relation there between the resolution bandwidth and the noise floor. If you take a kind of a wider resolution bandwidth, not as fine, maybe it does affect the noise floor and bring it up and so forth.
Let's see, PSA Series 2 is 1 megahertz to 2700 megahertz frequency range. Resolution bandwidths of 1 megahertz, 280 kilohertz, and 15 kilohertz. -96 dBm typical noise floor at -20 dBm reference level, which is where I was at.
Great info. Tom commented that isn't the noise floor relative to antenna gain? Perhaps there's different types of antennas that we're using on the AXT600.
This is a big antenna for this thing. Normally it's like a little antenna. You can also hook it into like your actual like antenna to your rig if you wanted to do it that way, but I like to use the little TTI antenna to do it. It's quarter wave, I think. Quarter wave antenna is what the little one is. This might be a little bigger.
Yeah, that looks like a half wave or even possibly greater.
It's like a little bigger wave, so I think it's probably that's part of it. But I do actually, I think there's a lot of credence to what Corey says, because I think that the AXT is more sensitive than the TTI, definitely. Newer technology, newer components, you know, you're working within your own system of sound versus an outside source. So of course, this is going to be a little different. But I will tell you that it was extremely accurate across the world. Like I had almost no frequency coordination issues. Very rarely did I have, unless I messed up myself and forgot to like empty out yesterday's frequencies out of my scan, which is a thing, by the way. If you're like me and you use the similar show file and you go in to do your scan, you pull out the show from yesterday, and sometimes I would forget to unclick keep current frequencies or keep current exclusions or whatever it is in that box, and I would keep all the frequencies from the day before and then coordinate on top of that, and I'd be like, I have no frequencies, what's going on? Except for that's like the only time I ever had issues. And the resolution, the reason I really like this is because I can take it inside and outside. So I could, like, if I'm in an arena and I'm having like weird wireless things, I can scan in the arena, and then I can step outside with the TTI and do a scan outside and see what's happening on the outside of things. Because a lot of times in a lot of cities, like, you're getting cancellation from the arena itself and blockage, and sometimes things get through that you don't know. So when you walk outside, you'll get a different scan than what you have inside. So I would like layer those scans in Workbench. And then I would coordinate around the areas where if there were outside peaks, I would take that out of my, I'd exclude that out of my zone, because I didn't want the chance that it would break through in the arena or wherever, So that is one pro, I guess, to having like a mobile scanner unit like this. Like, you can walk different areas in the building and take it and actually scan with it and get a reading, so you actually know what's going on. Like, say your artist needs to walk off stage, like, we were figuring for the Houston rodeo, Lizzo potentially had to go all the way across to the other side of, the space, which is really far. So we were trying to figure out how we would get wireless there, if it would, stay, how many antennas, like what kind of array we would have to do. So, we were scanning all the way across the arena floor. Like, we'd be on stage, we'd be halfway through, we'd be over near one door, we'd be over there doing scans, just figuring out, what was going on over there. So it's really handy to have something like that when you need to like mobily scan things, because frequencies are like in the air and they change, and much like waves, they like, hit each other and end up in different places. So it's good to know where things are, where there are trouble spots and stuff like that. So that's the only positive I have for this compared to like a AXT 600.
Well, I could think of another positive. We have some friends that do high-profile events like Super Bowl and other things, and it's not uncommon to see a directional paddle on a portable analyzer to go find an offender that may be unauthorized broadcasting, like maybe a videographer with a camera kit that they didn't check in with the powers that be, and got to go find out where they are and shut down that rogue frequency, because that could.
Wow, I never even thought about that, but that's
a great
come into my world. Wow.
Absolutely, yeah. Put a directional shark fin on it, and you got a handle, and you just kind of go around and checking out where it is. You get closer to them, and go shut them down and politely tell them to turn it off.
Ooh, forensic RF coordination. I like it.
Yeah. Awesome. The other thing, just like, kind of an esoteric use case, but like, I think the only time maybe you would get in trouble, because you're getting the same type of information. Obviously, you're not in the same antenna system as you would be with an AXT 600. But if you are using the AXT 600 for its frequency server privileges, like changing frequencies on the fly, interference detection and avoidance, Axiom digital, et cetera, then that is all based on the exclusion threshold, or that red line in Workbench. And of course, if the noise floor varies between the scan that you imported and actually in use AXT 600, that could cause some issues with what the AXT 600 thinks is free. But if you have an AXT 600 in your rack, you probably are going to be using that to do the scan anyway, and not using an external device.
I will say that for the scan that I did for the TTI, compared to my other scans, like most of my scans, like if I pulled them up, if we like pull them in here, if I pulled up my RF folder, of my old scans, they're all close to like the 100 noise floor. So I'm not sure why this one. I do believe it has to do with this antenna, because normally, like, I'm pulling that exclusion threshold. Like, the way that I coordinate is I drop in my scans, I pull that exclusion threshold down as close as I can till everything is pretty much blued out, and then slowly move it up and then coordinate from there each time I move it up to, and then I'll lock the frequencies to have the strongest frequencies in my coordination. So most of the time I was pulling down my exclusion threshold to like 95, 96. So I'm actually not sure why this scan is like 10 or more dB higher than I'm used to for it. I do think it probably is something to do with this.
Yeah, certainly could be.
Yeah. Hey, look, question for Loreen. Harry was asking, how many frequencies are you typically wrangling during a show, like a Lizzo performance or other projects you work on? Just ballpark.
It depends. It varies. The most I've ever coordinated was 42 units. This year I had to like surprise coordinate an entire festival that they didn't have an RF coordinator on when I rolled in with Lizzo, and like all the other bands were like, we're just making it work. And I was like, oh no, we're not doing this today. So I had to like request in a TT. I called Claire. They remotely coordinated from me from Nashville so that I could get through our sound check. Then I got a TTI and coordinated the entire festival. And like, it was the first time I've done that level of coordination, but you know, I've been coordinating forever, and I had to do Excel sheets and stuff like that. So 42 devices is my maximum that I've ever coordinated. And for Lizzo every day, especially when we got to the end, when we almost had a band, I was looking at 18, 20, 25 or 26 units that I would have to coordinate for the band thing. And then when we were doing our main show run, it was about 20 units or 22 units I was coordinating every day. Sennheiser and Shure. I didn't just carry Shure units, so I would also coordinate my Sennheiser frequencies and wireless Workbench as well. So I would just use Wireless Systems Manager to plug in the frequencies, but Wireless Workbench is such a more high quality coordination that I much prefer to coordinate in there than anywhere else. And I'm sure there's other like IAS and stuff like that, other coordination programs, but this is definitely my most familiar and useful one. Yeah, so 42 devices was my max, and an average between 22 to 30 devices is normal for me.
That's awesome. Somebody else was asking, Marty was asking, has anybody used the Nuts About Nets or Aronia analyzers? I know I personally have used the Signal Hound in the past, and it still can spit out that CSV data and such. Maybe you or Corey have some experience with that?
I've used RF Explorer a little bit, but it's not high. It was never like, if you compare a RF Explorer scan to a TTI or an AXT, like the information, the levels, it's not as high quality. I've had people try to coordinate me on RF Explorer in New York, and like, it's just hits constantly, so I'd have to re-coordinate. That's my experience with it. Just, I'm at a different level. Like, I'm sure that works in you know, the medium market, but at my level I can't use it. Signal Hound, I've heard wonderful things about. I have not personally used it, but one of my good friends who's a big RF coordinator, you might know him, Matt Russell, he uses Signal Hound, and he touts it and touts its abilities very much, and it's specifically its monitoring compared to the other ones. It has excellent frequency monitoring apparently. I was actually going to play with it this year. There are a lot of things I was going to do this year, but plans changed. So I can't say I've experienced it myself, but I do have a lot of friends that use it, and it's been recommended to me a couple of times.
Just wanted to pop in about RF Explorer. I have one. You know, you can pull the scans into Workbench. As Loreen commented, you do get scan data. The granularity is poor, so it ends up looking in Workbench very blocky, kind of like a Lego version of a scan. That being said, if some scan data is better than no scan data.
Yeah.
So.
Too true.
That's true.
I'm not dissing RF Explorer. I just can't use it in my world. It's just
for the level of shows you do. no.
Yeah.
But it's a great device, you know, like, and it's very affordable, you know, as far as the handheld scanners. I think it's definitely
Like
probably the most
100,
affordable. Yeah, it's like $100.
I think it's
So
baby's first RF scanner. Like everybody should get one when we start doing RF coordination. Like if you're just doing small shows and stuff, like $200, what can it hurt to have it? And it makes you an asset to whatever production company you're working with or whatever show you're on. Even as a lighting person or a video person, hey, you guys are dealing with frequencies too. So like, don't be afraid to like get into it, you know, specifically in video and things like that. If you guys want to go into film, like literally a film or a TV set is all frequencies. Comms are all coordinated. So if you guys want to get familiar with it, it just makes you more of an asset to whoever you're working for.
absolutely.
That's great. Yeah, even you know, some of the smaller and expensive RF Explorer ones may have good use for just site survey. I know I've been on some jobs like that where you just go and seeing, hey, what frequency range is the most clean here, and you know, you can look at the Workbench database and that sort of stuff. But actually, being on site gives you a good overview. But if you need more granularity, then of course there are other tools. Yeah.
But to be fair, you know, even if you're not using RF Explorer, you can take a Shure IEM pack and get the same, actually probably a better level of scan than you could from an RF Explorer and plug it into wireless Workbench the same way. That is something that you can do. That was how I started RF scanning. I would scan on the units and then I would plug it into the Workbench, you know, or you can even coordinate right off the unit, but you can also coordinate off of an actual unit of a similar scan.
Some comments related to this came in from John and Josh. You know, setting the RBW or the resolution bandwidth on the TTI to 15 kilohertz can help the noise floor out. And much like Loreen's workflow you were talking about, Josh was saying a tip is to run multiple scans at smaller resolutions and then add all 10 of them or however many of them into Workbench can get you a better resolution and a little bit more granularity there. So those are great tips. Yeah.
Yeah, that's how I do it. I'm only scanning our usable frequency range, which is like 450 to 700 maybe. Like I'm being generous going up there. I wasn't using anything in the 900 bands, really, so I didn't have to scan up there. And we're not in the US. We're not into like the 1.3 range yet, so not like Europe. So I didn't really have to do a whole lot. So I only needed those three. But yeah, actually, it's funny. So on the comments, Jen, I know we had someone. Taylor Holden, I think, popped on and said that he would like to be on the next one, and Brandon Blackwell learned from him. Well, I learned a lot of this from Brandon Blackwell, so this is like layers of information coming through. He taught me a lot of this about the TTI and scanning, and I just happened to be the one that did all of it for the last year or so. So these other guys, they're also incredible RF people. If you need to ask Brandon Blackwell or Taylor Holden, they have tons of experience with external scanners and things like that, you know. Oh, Jen?
Oh yeah, perfect. We're trying to make the rounds, but you know, we couldn't help but ask you back again because you did so great at the last Workbench one.
Oh no, I know. I just wanted to throw some credit out there to those boys.
Totally. And if those of you who haven't seen an RF Explorer,
it's so cute.
It is so cute. It's so portable. Like it's really just so easy to travel with. So as is the TTI, honestly. So I
love this thing. I honestly like the TTI. This is what it normally carries in a little thing like this. My little briefcase for it. I would keep all my stuff in it. This comes on the bus with me every night. And so does my show laptop and RF laptop. These are the things that are my show stoppers. So they come with me every night. My in-ears, my TTI, and my RF laptop, my show laptop, always come on the bus. They never go in the truck. So it's nice to have something that easily portable, you know, because when we're loading in, you don't know, as a sound person, you don't always have access to the gear. So sometimes you get in and it's my load in time, but I can't do anything. So what can I do? I can go around and scan. And coordinate before I have to do anything. So I can have that done before I even get my gear set up. So once all my in-ears are done, I could just be like, boop, and pop it push it to the wireless and I'm done. So that's another handy thing about having a portable scanner, like high quality portable scanner is like, if you're on tour, I can take it and do things. I can take it on the bus with me and scan. I can pre-coordinate with it, you know. It's a little harder to take an AXT 600 out of a rack to do that. So
it doesn't quite fit in a carry-on, does it?
Yep.
I would love to. I would love to take it in and do that, but people will be like, oh, we're going to take this unit out of your rack to do this thing. And I'll be like, if you touch my rack, I might have to like attack you. So we are not pulling apart a rack in the middle of a tour. So
a couple comments came in just exactly what you were saying. It's like, you know, maybe you have some gear in the rack, but it's on the truck and you're waiting for it to be loaded in, or it's not powered up yet. That sort of stuff. You have your own personal scanner and your gear there, so you always have access to it. It's nice.
And also, like, the reality is like things happen on the road. So like you never know what's going to happen. Like your truck might not make it till mid-afternoon, and if you're lucky, you have like 2 or 3 hours to set up and get to sound check. You know, and that's not a lot of time compared to when we do like an 8 a.m. load-in, you know, and I have the afternoon to do that. So if I could be working beforehand and coordinating and stuff, then it cuts off easily 30 to 45 minutes of my time. And then all I have to do is sync units when they come in and hand them out. Like if I'm rushing into sound check, it'd just be like, here, like, so.
It's awesome. Hey, a question for Loreen. David was asking, what TTI model do you use? What is it, like your current like preference?
This is the PSA 1302, just the AM TTI, the regular one. That's the one that I use. That's generally, I've used the TTI 2 as well. That's not much different. Very similar screens and stuff. But yeah, this is the PSA 1302. If you go to their website, it's the first one listed. I think it's their most popular model. It looks a little complicated, like as a scanner when you get into it. It's a little weird to set stuff up. I'm actually going to do a live tomorrow on my social medias showing people how to like set up the TTI for scanning, how I break it down, how I do my presets and stuff like that to do the scan. So it's a little more simple because it is a little bit of a daunting scanner. Like it is not initially the most friendly scanner. It's a nerd scanner. It's like a nerd scanner. There's a lot of levels, a lot of gradical shifts you can take. Like you curtail it how you want. You can be at -20, -10, 0. You can do whatever you want with it. So knowing how to set all that stuff up is really important. Definitely, I don't know what the difference is between the TTI and the TTI 2. I didn't notice a big difference. I think maybe the TTI 2 might have the lower noise floor, which might be what I'm experiencing because it's a regular TTI, and maybe the TTI 2, which is what I mostly had for most of the year coordinating. There might be a different noise floor because it's a newer version, but I don't know enough to speak on that necessarily.
Cool. It's awesome information about the workflow. Corey, do you have some more to add about like some newer things with Workbench 6 or workflow changes as far as Workbench is concerned?
So I guess for anybody who started using SLXD or AD3 since those were announced, those are in the latest versions of Wireless Workbench. I'm not special enough to have gotten my hardware for either one of those yet. Oh yeah, so there's your AD3 plug-on transmitter. That is now being demodulated in the application. So whether you're looking at the front panel or you're looking at Wireless Workbench, you'll see that information pop up for that device. Something else, if you're using Axient Digital that we recently added, is a widget for the access point. So let me see, I got a transmitter somewhere around here. Yeah, here we go. So previously, you weren't able to see which access point a given transmitter was connected to, but now if I fire a couple of them on, you've also got this access point. So if you're really concerned about where you've got your transmitters, you might have some of these access points located based on a studio or a certain stage. And so being able to track that stuff down and say like, oh yeah, this is my AD610 that's located on, in Studio A versus Studio B, Studio C, you can start tracking those transmitters a little better.
That's so cool.
Yeah, this has been pretty handy, especially for me. In Shure Niles, we've got access points on just about every floor. So it's kind of neat to sort of see when they like fall off of one access point and then join on another one.
That's really cool.
That's neat. Widget, I love that.
Widget. We're
Widgets
in the
all
world
over the
of
place, man.
Yep.
Yeah, absolutely.
Python code.
To circle back a little bit, we had a question from Rob a little bit earlier. He was asking about, can you expand the search radius for TV channels, please? He was asking. So,
oh, sure.
Yeah.
So, hey, Rob, long time no talk.
You decide how far you want it to go.
Yeah, absolutely. So we could change the search radius. If I'm operating indoors and it's like, you know what, I really don't care about all this stuff that's 50 miles away, I might drop this down to 25, and that changes pretty materially what falls in here. You can also choose that for iterative searches in this database, we could say we want to preserve this selected TV station. So if you wanted to incrementally work your way up from a smaller radius to a larger radius, you could see which ones start getting added based on their distance. If you just want to start fresh every time, you can unselect this and just hit this, and that will give you the current one. But yeah, you can absolutely raise this up too if you wanted to go to 70 miles or something like that. You could certainly search at 70-mile radius.
When I do outdoor festivals, I set it to 60 miles, and generally inside, I do between 40 to 50 miles. Mm-hmm. And I will say, for people who are coordinating this or thinking about cutting off the radius a little bit, like going down to 25, be careful with the digital TV stations, because they might be off when you're doing your scan, but if you're within 30 miles of them, if they turn on, they will blast you. It has happened. I have found out on my own. It is from personal experience. So take my word for it, and don't try to put your frequencies in a TV digital station that's within 25 miles of your venue, because they might be off when you're coordinating, but guess what? It's going to come on at some point. You don't know when it's going to be.
That's a very, very good point. At any point during one of these scans, like let me clean some of this up so we could see a little bit. Some here in Chicago, and that's what we originally calculated for. As an example, we might say like, oh yeah, I don't really see much energy here in TV 14 or 15, but that's where public safety is at in Chicago. So at any point, someone could drive by, fire up a comm, and next thing you know, you're out of frequency there. Yep. The same thing is true for TV channels. Looking at TV channel 28 and 29 right now, these are technically restricted. Yep. Well, actually 28, that was me. 29 is restricted. It's not showing right now, but better to play it safe and just say, you know what, I'm going to stay away from this one.
So to extrapolate on that, Kenneth asked a question, and maybe we can answer this collectively. If Workbench tells you the TV channel database says a TV station should exist, but my scanner shows it's completely empty, does that mean the TV band is still off limits for our mics because it should be there?
Yes.
Mm-hmm. I think to play it safe, that's the way to go, at least in my experience. Also, I mean, the FCC has done a thing called co-channel operation, where if you're inside a building or something and there is a TV station outside, but you're not receiving enough signal, you can use it, but I believe that does require a Part 74 license in order to take advantage of that. So you should try to play it safe unless you are a license holder, I believe, and then you can possibly use it if you don't see anything there. It's like one of those things you shouldn't do right off the rip. You always go conservative, right? And then, open up those channels if you need them and you're permitted to do so.
But you're also walking a very dangerous line, because it's not like analog radio signal anymore where you can pick up on it all the time. This is digital. It goes off and on, ones and zeros. So where it might be off right now, it will turn on and it will be a frequency. Like when I'm in New York City, I do a scan in the morning before I coordinate. Right. But then I do another scan in the afternoon, because in New York, they turn on they do rehearsals and things like that in the afternoon for Broadway. And that's when they start powering up TV stations and wireless units and stuff like that. So what you scan at one time will be completely different from what you scan, say, around 5 p.m. versus 11 a.m., like in most big cities. And from experience, trying to fit a frequency in a TV station that you think isn't active and is within like 25 or 30 miles of your position, not a great idea, especially when it turns on and blasts out your frequency range, because I've had it happen. And Shure, I love very much for what they do when you drop. They don't go, but Sennheiser, when the ears drop, they go. So don't do it. Trust me. Just trust me on that one. Don't ride that line. It's a dangerous line, and you're going to get in trouble when it goes bad. 50 miles, 40 miles, 50 miles, cool. Anything under 30 miles, you're riding a danger line.
Absolutely. So to kind of circle back a little bit, Rob was talking about the max distance for it. I think it's currently capped at 70, and he was asking if there's a possibility of expanding that farther than 70 miles, maybe in an outdoor situation, or environmental concerns with the atmosphere.
Yeah, I think we can do that.
Yeah, he's asking. I need 75, so maybe make it
for you, Rob. For you, Rob, anything.
We'll pay extra, he says. So.
Oh, excellent! I'll hold you to that.
Is that a tip? Is that coming to you, Corey?
I'll split it with you all. We'll all go out to dinner.
20% more than zero is still zero. So. And speaking of free software, I think we'll put a shameless plug in here for ShurePlus Channels. If you're on the iOS store, is now free. So previously, if you download it, you could use it and you have to unlock it for a fee to use your devices with it. Now it's, for the time being, it's completely wide open. You can use it with any compatible Workbench compatible device, and it doesn't cost anything. So if you got an iPhone or iPad, download it, check it out today, and you can play around with it even without any stuff connected. So you might have some fun with that this afternoon.
Yeah. I don't have the AV adapter to show it, but I can put up demo mode here and point it toward the screen.
Look at that.
As much as you can see that.
Yeah, we can see that. It's good. I know we're running a little bit over here, but we have a couple questions, maybe back to the workflow aspect and such, and for Loreen and Corey. Dan was asking, when trying to get more frequencies in a crowded RF scenario, is there a correct order in which to uncheck the channel to intermod spacing boxes? Should I start at the bottom with third transmitter, third order, or maybe at the top? How do you approach this? I think when you're trying to get frequencies and it's just not happening because of what's going on in your environment, how do you relax the filters, and in what order would you approach that?
So I do a lot of tight coordination where you have to make magic happen in many cities. So for me, the way that I generally do this is I determine, so in Wireless Workbench, you can set your width to robust, standard, or many frequencies. I always coordinate with everything in robust all the time. That's how I always start my scans. And then I will drop that down gradually as I go through and decide what I need. So I always split my units between G10 and J8. So that I would have 2 frequency bands available, except for J8 frequency band got very strange at the end of last year, particularly in the big cities when you're in the 600 bands, because T-Mobile and stuff like that walked in and started to expand. It got really, really bad in different places. So what I would do is I would go to many frequencies or more frequencies on there. And what I would do is I would drop in my scans. I would pull my exclusion threshold down to as low as I could take it, where it would drop out every single frequency. The whole thing is blocked out, and then I would move it up 1 dB. If any frequencies opened up in my bands, I would lock them, and I always made my start, first order, first pack, would be my star packs. They would be the first and strongest frequencies, and they would be locked. And then gradually I would up it. And if I couldn't get frequencies at a certain point, I would jump into the exclusion area and start looking for, radio stations at 40 miles, 45 miles, anything over there that I could drop out. The reality is sometimes coordinating wireless is magic. So when I was in Prospect Park in Brooklyn, I literally was in a Wireless Workbench file for a half an hour, just pulling it apart, making it the widest that I can make it and moving through it, and literally manually finding places where I could put my frequencies. That's how it ended up. And I would have to move things around. I just made it work when I needed to make it work. I had extra units and stuff that I wouldn't use. The only person that really needed to be on J8 was my playback engineer. So if I needed to cut it, I could cut 3 to 4 frequencies of J8 and still have enough units on my front end. I would just have to reroute my mix up there. So if I could get 1 J8, so there were times where I'm literally in the graph as fine as it could be, just trying to fit, just in one spot and then coordinating it. And then the trick is when you coordinate a frequency, if you want to see if there's interference on the frequency, you sync the pack, put the pack to the frequency and leave the unit off and look at the pack. And then you will see on its antenna if you are getting interference or not on that frequency. That'll tell you if it's clean or not. And if it's clean, if there's nothing coming up on the antenna, then when you turn on the unit, it will be a clean signal. But otherwise, you're going to have to re-coordinate it that way. So that's one of the ways that I do really tight coordinations. And I'm sure that there are much more efficient ways, but sometimes you have to like dig in there and do it yourself a little bit when you're dealing with places like New York City. New York City is the worst. The other worst place that I had to coordinate was Miami, weirdly. All of the pirate radio stations down there and the illegal frequencies that are happening are actually really difficult, and the Coast Guard, and there's military stuff. So that was one of the other really difficult places that I had to coordinate. And Dallas was a very difficult city to coordinate as well, where I had to do some, what I call it magic. Like they call coordination the dark arts, right? Like in our business, they call RF coordinators like the dark arts. Yeah, I know why, because you have to do magic. But Workbench is excellent because it does let you get so fine. Like I can literally, you can go between the grains. Corey, can you like pull out the graph so that we can see how fine you can get down into like looking at these frequency bands?
Which scan am I looking at here? Test, that's right.
That's the ATX scan. Oh no, that's mine. It's 100. So like you see how you can really like get in there and see the spaces and what the scans look like and if there's any hits in there. So you could go in and literally be like, okay, so 541 or whatever, 549 or something is clean, and it's right in between these two things. So I can maybe fit this in here and hope that the intermods aren't gonna hit anything else. But the beautiful thing about Workbench is that you can turn on intermods and see where they're gonna fall. So that's what I would do when I had to do like really difficult coordination. I would turn on intermods, I would coordinate what I needed to, and then when I needed to get like three or frequencies in there, I would kind of like manually do it, and then I would figure out what I would have to adapt to make it work that day, because we're losing frequency spectrum all over the United States right now. So sometimes, like I said, my 600 band stuff, my J8 band stuff, half the time I couldn't use most of it. So.
Especially now after June of 2020. So it's a done deal with the incentive auction. Unless you converted it, right? With
you guys coming out with like 1.3, the European, level wireless stuff. Come on now.
We got to talk to our friends at the FCC about that. See what's going on. To circle back a little bit, Jason Glass, a friend of Shure and RF coordinator extraordinaire, brought up the topic again about operating on top of DTV stations that may not be received. The Workbench or the database may see it. However, if you're not receiving it and you're indoors, if the TV signal is measured at below -84 dBm, you can use it. I still think you do need a Part 74. I'm pretty sure about that. So you might want to revisit that, but that's another option in case you're not getting enough frequencies and that signal isn't coming in. A classic scenario, as Loreen brought up, is in New York and Broadway. I mean, it's crazy out on the sidewalk, but if you're inside of Madison Square Garden or down below the street in a Broadway theater with a lot of brick around you and such, the building shielding can work towards your advantage and make your show happen. That's how it all happens. So.
And that's when I say, like, it's nice having a portable scanner, because standing inside and then stepping outside and understanding what's happening is pretty good. And also, if you are coordinating in New York, do a scan when you first get in and do a scan in the afternoon, because it's going to be a vastly different scope. Trust me.
And just to kind of circle way back to the beginning, a bunch of people asked about what is intermodulation. I'm just going to go over it really quickly in case you're new to frequency coordination or new to Workbench. And the intermodulation is basically unwanted distortion in nonlinear components like amplifiers and so forth. So in layman's terms, if I have two transmitters here, they're both sending out energy over a specific frequency. But what happens is some of that energy goes out of one antenna and it goes back down the other antenna and can cause this amplifier inside of here to distort. much like a guitar amplifier, but not in a good way. And that distortion shows up on your scan as like virtual frequencies, or we call them intermodulation frequencies. And the whole point of coordinating your frequencies and using software like Workbench or others is to make sure that you don't put other frequencies that are using on those virtual or intermod frequencies. And that's pretty much the whole name of the game with frequency coordination when we're talking about intermods. You know, we have a whole bunch of classes and courses in the Shure Audio Institute about, you know, deep dive into that. But anytime you've got transmitters happening, you will have some intermods. And as Corey's showing here, the ones we're interested in are going to be the odd ones, because the even ones cancel out. So third, fifth, seventh, ninth. Typically, we always calculate for the third if you can, fifth, and then as you can see, they go down in amplitude as you get to the seventh and the ninth and so forth. So when we were talking earlier about workflow of which ones you uncheck first, typically it would be the higher order ones, the seventh, the fifth, and then, you know, if you need to, you can go to the third and such. But that's what we're talking about when we're talking about intermodulation in a quick blurb there.
I will say that the intermods and being able to view them like that is very important, and understanding them is pretty important too, especially if you're doing, like what I said, any manual coordination on top of what's being coordinated. Like turning that on and understanding where the intermods of all of your units are falling will save you some problems. Jason Glass, that man has coordinated more units than I probably have ever seen. We did the Essence Fest together in 2018. 2020 is the last year. I want to say last year because it's ridiculous. He had, you guys, he easily had like 100 units. Like he is so organized and so insane. Like that man is a genius. So Jason Glass, shout out to your wireless prowess. You are a BA. I don't want to curse on this, but
here. Yeah.
He's dropping some serious knowledge in the chat, let me tell you. So
anyone who's watching, go read that because he's the guy.
A question came up for Loreen from Kenneth. He was asking, do you use any RF filtering between your mics and your in-ears on those separate systems?
What do you mean? Not really.
Like probably, you know, like you could put a filter on your antennas, kind of like blinders on a horse is kind of like I explained it. So they're only looking at a certain swath of the spectrum, and then maybe aside from your in-ears, or perhaps you just keep them separate in your coordination in different zones or blocks.
Yeah, I keep them separate in my coordination. So when I'm setting up my coordination, I mean, obviously I have send and receive antennas, and I make my antenna array to properly address those things, you know, 6 feet apart, you know, receive directionals and, you know, all that stuff. I set it up my own little array. That isn't a whole other walkthrough, but I never have to set any filtering when I set it up properly, because I'm not really getting any issues with like my send going into my receive antenna or vice versa. As long as you have things set up properly, antenna wise, I've found that I haven't had to do that yet just by my setups. That's not to say that they don't, but I also have pretty extremely directional antennas for certain things, like my in-ears. I use a helical or dome. And for my wireless mics, I use paddles that I move across the stage to directionalize in, because particularly with my Lizzo set, I don't know if you guys saw any pictures from the tour. I had these big grates that would be down in front of me, these big metal grates, and they would create like a Faraday cage almost. So if I didn't have my my stuff properly coordinated and angled and spaced, I like wouldn't get any RF out to the stage at all. Because it would just hit that wall of metal and kind of like be like, bounce back to me. So I did end up playing a lot with power, like pushing things 50 milliwatts, pulling down the power on my antennas and stuff, and really played with that versus filtering. Like I was in vastly different spaces from day to day. Like I could be in a 2,000 person club for one day, and literally the next day I could be in an arena. So I had to really be conscientious of power, what is pushing, who is my main power pull, you know, like my in-ears for Lizzo and Sophia would be my main power. If I needed to push it, then I would pull things down. But I never really did antenna filtering or any frequency filtering on any of my stuff. I just made sure my arrays and my power on my antennas and everything was cohesive.
Awesome. Wow, this has been so great so far. I very much appreciate the questions coming in from the audience. This is awesome. Not only feature requests, but topics to cover and such. A lot of people were asking if this session will be recorded and be available later, because I know it's a lot of information to digest, and we kind of went all over the place with different topics concerning workflow and Workbench. But yes, if you check shure.com/webinars, that will be up there and posted in a little bit, as well as Mark dropped some links in the chat there about if you're interested in learning more about intermodulation or frequency coordination basics. We have a whole Shure Audio Institute leg of our company that is about education and so forth. Lots more training and online classes and things specific to come. So please, if you're interested, check out those links. We'll always looking for new topics and things that are interested to you to talk about instead of just going off on a certain thing. So with that, I'd like to say thank you to our guests here, Corey Peoples and Loreen. I've really had a great time. It made the hour and 20 minutes fly by. I learned a bunch of stuff myself, and man, it's always great talking to both of you and hearing the latest, greatest and such.
Yeah, likewise.
Yeah, thanks.
Yeah,
I always have a great time on these.
Yeah, it's been awesome. And then more to come in September, of course, as we discussed. We'll have the tech talk every other week, and then we'll do the workflow sessions every other week as well on Fridays. Shure.com/webinars to get the latest, greatest on it. I'd like to also thank the staff behind the scenes, including Nick and Mark and Jen and everybody else who helped contribute and post links and give us questions from the massive amount of questions we've had. So thank you to everybody. And with that, we'll see you on the next one. I hope you enjoy your weekend.
Bye.
Bye.
See ya.